Tuesday morning, May the 5th, which incidentally is the day before the appearance day of the half-man, half-lion incarnation of Lord Krishna called Nara Shringa. Nara means man and Shringa means lion. His celebration will be tomorrow, May the 6th, and we'll include information about that part of the story, as well as quotes from Prahlad Maharaj, the 5-year-old great devotee of Lord Nrsingadev. In fact, we even threw in a couple of quotes from Prahlad today just to get you in the mood for tomorrow's observance of Nrsingadev's appearance. We'll talk about that at our Bhagavatam class, and then I think I'll be in Salt Lake City at 6:30 Mountain Time giving another class on the pastimes of Lord Nrsingadev, the half-man, half-lion incarnation of the Lord, and his boy devotee, Prahlad Maharaj. Welcome, Joe, Anjali, Vishal, Barsana. Thank you this morning. Roman, Anibal, all the regulars. Good. We're on the 9th verse, 2nd chapter, 1st canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Govinda Dev. Jimmy from Minnesota. Om Agara Timarandasya Ganangana Salakya Chaksurun Miritam Yena Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutare Swayam Rupakaramayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamaram Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Sam Sadevam Savadvaitam Savadutam Parejana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitam Scha Nama Om Vishnu Paraya Krishna Pastaya Bhutade Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Deva Guru Pachari Nirvishesa Sanyvari Paskadade Sarhani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Dayam Davis has joined us. Hare Krishna. Radhe Sham Prabhu from Tooele. Please accept my obeisances. Reading the verse here, again, 9th verse, 2nd chapter, 1st canto. Dharmasya hi apavargasya narto ritaya bhatavate nartasya dharma kantasya kamo labaya hi shmita. All occupational duties are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. In the Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, 25th verse, we also find this verse here. Without desiring fruitive results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word taught. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. And Prabhupada writes, to be elevated to the spiritual position, one should not act for any material gain. Acts should be performed for the ultimate gain of being transferred to the spiritual kingdom, back to home, back to Godhead. The ultimate aim of religious performance is to release oneself from material bondage and regain the life of freedom in the transcendental world, where the personality of Godhead is the supreme person. And we can hardly even imagine that. We're so conditioned to work for money. And the reason that we work for money is so that we can use that money to get sense gratification. This is called artha kama. And then also you throw in dharma, which is religiosity. And most people see religion also, whatever they see nowadays, they see it as a means to get money, which is a means to get sense gratification. That's basically the way we're conditioned and we're trained by the culture. That's why you go to college, why you get advanced degrees. The whole purpose is to get money so then you can enjoy sense gratification. And even people with their shopping list, what they want, the new toys they want, the promotion they want, what they want for their kids, and just goes on and on and on and on. So in every sphere of life, including the religious sphere of life, people occupy themselves, people engage themselves for arta, which means profit, and to 99.9% of the people, profit doesn't just mean peace or inner contentment or abundance or knowledge. Profit means just money. That's what it means to 99.9% of the people. And the reason for getting the money is not to use that money in the service of the Lord or to honor God. Maybe pittance, maybe a small proportion allotted to God, along with mortgage payments and car payments and ATVs and college tuition, all like that. But the motivation is to get money for sense gratification, not money for missionary work, for charities, and for honoring the Lord. And those who are better amongst us, as I said, they'll earmark a certain portion of their income for good causes and all like that. However, this verse says that we should not work for money for sense gratification at all. We should work for ultimate liberation. And the reason is that those who have attained ultimate liberation by serving and honoring and keeping God first place tell us that there's no greater gain. There's no greater satisfaction. There's no greater freedom. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Yam labda chaparam lada manyake nadikam tataha yajman stito hi dukena gurinapi bichalite. It says, one who achieves love of God and who engages everything, iha yasya hareyadasha manasa karmana gira, mind, wealth, body, words, one who fully engaged, 100%, not 10%, not 15%, not 2%, but those who are 100% engaged in serving the Lord with their body, their mind, their wealth, and their words, they think that they have achieved the greatest gain. They think that there is no other gain that can compare with the gain of being situated on the platform of love of God. And how do we know they're right? How do we know this is true? It says, Yam labda chaparan manyake nadakankana. They think that this is the great gain. There's no other gain. It's the pearl of great price. You see, it's one achievement that trumps everything else. House, cars, prestige, name in the newspaper, Olympic gold, prime ministership, presidentship, billions of dollars in the bank. This gain trumps all that, hands down. Those aforementioned achievements are like a drop, and achieving love of God is like the ocean. There's really no comparison. But how do we know? How do we know that they're not just spinning it? And the answer is, Yam nabda chaparan manyake stito hi dukena. Even if something terrible happens to them, a reversal of fortune, the loss of a loved one. For instance, Arjuna lost his 16-year-old son, Abhimanyu. And in spite of having lost his 16-year-old son, Abhimanyu, that did not dislodge him 1 centimeter from undivided, uninterrupted, 24/7 devotional service to his friend and Lord, Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. That's how we know, in fact, that love of God is, in fact, by far the greatest gain, is because people who experience reversals that would devastate, that would completely undo, that would destroy even ordinary people of faith, even church-going religious people. There are certain things in life that could totally destroy them. Those who are devotees still, even after those reversals, still even after, they think themselves the most fortunate people. No matter what happens. In fact, they think that the reversal, the loss, should have been much greater according to their karma, but Krishna soft-pedaled it. I remember many years ago when I was a new devotee in Australia, they had a nationally televised TV show with David Frost, who was a famous host in those days. He was from England, but he was visiting Australia, and so on the occasion of his visit, they hosted several shows which were viewed nationally, and one was on marriage, and one was on religion, one was on God. And so in the auditorium, David Frost was down on the stage, and in the auditorium, they had all the religious leaders of Australia, the top people. We were there, And I'll never forget the man who stood up and introduced himself at that time. This is like 1971. He stood up and introduced himself as the head of the Church of England in Australia and confessed that he used to believe in God, but since the Spanish Civil War, he could no longer put his belief in God. This is the head of the Anglican Church in all of Australia, said that he lost his belief in God because of something that God did in his sovereignty, in his wisdom, in his vision, something that God did, that because he couldn't understand it, he stood up in front of all of Australia and unburdened himself that he wasn't sure. He didn't say, I don't believe in God. He said, but my faith is shaken and I'm not sure. Well, that would never happen to someone who's situated, Yajmin Stito, who's founded, grounded, planted, embedded in love of God. That would never happen. It happens to religious people because religious people in this age espouse religion, follow religion for material gain. They don't follow religion in order to get ultimate liberation and love of God. That's the problem. Here it said, you should follow religion for only one reason. You should do anything, work, raise a family, recreate. This says all occupational duties. That means, it doesn't just mean what you do to earn a living. It means anything that occupies you. Anything that occupies you, anything that you engage in, it should be done for the ultimate goal of liberation, not for material profit, which is a means towards sense gratification. Now, one example we have of that is the 5-year-old boy, Narada Muni. Narada Muni, even as, reverses. It's a terrible thing to lose your mother. It's a terrible thing to have no money in the bank. It's a terrible thing to be fatherless. It's a terrible thing to be out in the world on your own if you're an adult. Narada Muni had all those reverses as a 5-year-old boy. So there were many ways that he could have reacted to that. He could have had a pity party, could have been overcome with paralysis, waited for some charity to come scoop him up and put him in an institution. He could have done any number of things. There were, generally speaking, when something bad happens, we try to counteract it. So he had to counteract being an orphan, counteract losing his mother, counteract being without resources, counteract without a protection, counteract without money. But he chose that. He chose to do that. He chose to strike out. He chose to choose, even as a 5-year-old boy, with nothing. From our point of view, totally devastated, unfortunate, homeless, you name it. This is Narada Muni, orphaned, homeless. What he chose to do was immediately strike out for love of God. He disregarded all those disadvantages, thinking, if in this human form of life, then I'm going to take the valuable days, minutes, and moments of my life in order to try to achieve the highest thing, to achieve that destination, that goal, that position, which can never be reversed, which can never be undone, to get that profit, which can never be stolen from me. So as I launched out, someone's trying to call me from Culver City, and I'm stopping the car. As a 5-year-old boy, he launched out without any visa, without any passport, without any supplies, without any sandwiches, without any Ziploc bags, without any lunch, without any money in his pocket, without a credit card. And he just started wandering in the foothills of the Himalayas, chanting, this was his secret, chanting the holy names of the Lord. And it's interesting that whether or not he had achieved the perfectional stage at this point, he still felt, even as a beginner, tushtamana. He still felt deep satisfaction. And he was also near matsara. He was free from envy. His business, his meditation was chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is how he gives his testimony. Thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitation, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are benedictory. So doing, I traveled all over the earth, fully satisfied, humble, and non-envious. He realized that even at the age of 5, there was no time to be wasted. He was going to go for it. Prahlad Maharaj also, whom we're going to celebrate tomorrow on Lord Nrsimha's appearance day, he says, Komaram acharad pragna, dharmam bhagavatamiha, durabam api musha, tadapiya durmartiram. One should begin his Krishna consciousness as early as possible, from the age of 5, if it is possible, if it is doable. Why? Because this is the highest goal, and because we don't really have as much time as we think. We don't really have as much time as we think. Youth is generally spent in infantile pursuits. Old age can be 10 to 15 years as an invalid, debilitated, with loss of memory. And then family life takes up 20 or 30 years in the middle of it. What to speak of the fact that we spend a third of our life sleeping. We don't really have time. It's a big mistake to think, well, I'll get money, I'll enjoy, and then when I'm older, later on, I'll practice Krishna consciousness. Why should it be later on? If you need every valuable moment in order to achieve that goal, and if that is the ultimate goal, why should you settle for anything less? And that's the lesson that these 5-year-old Mahatmas, like Dhruva Maharaj, like Narada Muni, and like Prahlad Maharaj, are teaching us. Do it now. Don't do it tomorrow or next year or next month. Do it now, right now. Now is the time. Atato Brahma Jignasha. Now you have the human form of birth. Now, after having transmigrated through 8,400,000 lower species of life in which practicing love of God, pursuing love was not an option, now you have the rare and valuable opportunity of the human form of life. So it must be now or never. Use it or use it. And it says also here that everything that we do, it should be geared for this ultimate goal in life. Pursue the ultimate goal of love of God. Chanakya Pandit says, every moment in this human form of life is so valuable that you cannot rewind the clock, you cannot set back the clock on your life, even 1 minute, were you to offer millions of Swarna Kotabi. Swarna means gold, and Kotabi means of golden coins. Right now, it's 7:17. So if I want to make it 7:16, I cannot do that even if I offer thousands and thousands of gold coins. That means even 1 minute of this human form of life is incalculably valuable. So why would we want to waste it for getting... First of all, you have to spend so much time and dedicate your talents and your abilities, your energy, your determination for pieces of paper. For pieces of paper with green ink and Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson stamped on them. And then you take those pieces of paper and then you try to figure out how to invest those pieces of paper so that you can get some stimulation, some food rolling over the taste buds of your tongue, some nice aromas, or you want to go to a resort area so you can see some beautiful beaches and palm trees and smell the sand and surf. And it's just, and those pleasures are freely available to the hogs and the dogs. Maybe not on the same level, but whether you drink milk out of a gold pot or an iron pot, the taste of the milk is the same. So those pleasures, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling, are more readily available to the animals. The animals do not have to jump through all these hoops and go through all these preliminaries in order to get stimulation like we do. So why would you spend even 1 second of the human form of life, which cannot be redeemed by thousands and thousands of gold coin, in pursuing the same sense pleasures which are available to the animals? Why would you do that? Prahlad Maharaj didn't do it. Narada Muni didn't do it. Dhruva didn't do it. They were 5 years old. Isn't the tenderness to play and be frivolous almost irresistible at the age of 5? And yet they did it. They did exactly that. They resisted, or they transferred or sublimated those youthful energies into the service of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada says here, one who desires material benefit by such devotional activities, that's referring to people who use religion or practice religion in order to get money with the idea of getting sense gratification. It says people who are approaching the Lord, arto jignashi artati, because they need money. It says here they can never depend on the Lord even though he sits in their heart. Nor does the Lord give any direction to persons who worship him for material gain. So if you want money, you'll get money, but you won't get Krishna. Krishna makes himself unavailable. He may give you money. You say, Krishna, give me money. He may give you money just as a way of getting rid of you. Get Krishna. You'll not get wisdom. You'll not get creativity. You'll not get insight. Now consider that God has invested in us. He's invested in us wisdom, abilities, every one of us. It says psychologists and statisticians have said that everybody has at least 700 abilities. You may say, well, I'm not very talented, I'm just average. The average person has 700 abilities. And those abilities have been embedded in us by God. So God has invested in us. And he didn't invest those abilities and talents in us so that we could get our name in the newspaper, so that we could have other people glorifying us, have our name on their lips, so that we could have other people serving us. He didn't invest his nature when he created us so that we could become first place. He invested in us, as any does, in order to get a return. So we are invested with talents and abilities, basically on the condition that we use those to honor God. And if we use those to honor God, then he will further invest in us. But if we use them to just for self-promotion, self-aggrandizement, we waste those talents and abilities simply for temporary sense gratification, then they will be retracted. We will find ourselves more and more suffering from scarcity, from lack, you see. Just take the example. Let's say an investor, he comes to you. You're a financial manager. And so an investor comes to you, sit down, he says, I'll give you $10,000. Invest it, grow it, and we'll meet a year from now. So a year from now, you meet together, and he asks you, what did you do with my $10,000? And you said, well, I just kept it safe. Here it is, all back. He won't be happy. He'll take it away from you. Worse yet, if he says, what did you do with the $10,000? He said, oh, really? You want it back? I thought that was for me. I bought myself a sports car. I had some vacations in the Yucatan. I bought some trinkets. And he'll be more displeased. Take it back, and he may even punish you. But what if you meet after a year, and after he asks, what did you do with my $10,000? You say, well, here's 15. And what's he going to do then? He's not only going to leave the 15 with you, but he's going to add another $100,000. Secret of prosperity. Evam pravartitam chakram nanavartyatyaham. Lord gives to you. You use what you've got to honor him, to spread his name, fame, glories. Print books, organize festivals, support the local temple, start missions to spread the gospel of Bhagavad Gita and Lord Krishna. And what is Krishna going to do as a result of your having used what he invested in you to honor him? He's going to give you more. And you've basically tapped into an unlimited reservoir of talent, ability, joy, bliss, and abundance. Do you think that someone who is cent percent engaged in the service of the Lord is going to lack anything at all? I mean, even from an investment material point of view, even from a point of view of enjoying your senses, it makes the most sense to give everything back to the Lord. Because when you give back to the Lord what he's given you, then he gives to you more. And he has no limit to his resources. When you have the support of the Lord of millions and millions of universes backing you, behind you, do you think that you'll ever lack for anything? Is it even possible or conceivable? So why would you rely on your limited resources? Why would you rely on the stock market? Why would you rely on the banks? Why would you rely on the president? Why would you rely on the economy for your pleasure, for your happiness, for your security, and for ultimate gain? That would be illogical and senseless. Because in doing all of that, Krishna is going to take back what he gave you. And if you've really been selfish, if you've really misused the assets that he gave you for overt and shameless self-promotion, there will also be the backlash of punishment from the Lord. Because you have become not the investor on behalf of the Lord, but you have become a thief for all practical purposes. So Prabhupada says here, we have already discussed that pure devotional service to the Lord is automatically followed by perfect knowledge and detachment from material existence. But there are others who consider that all kinds of different occupational engagements, including those of religion, are meant for material gain. The general tendency of any ordinary man in any part of the world is to gain some material profit in exchange for religious or any other occupational service. Even in the Vedic literatures, for all sorts of religious performances, an allurement of material gain is offered, and most people are attracted by such allurements or blessings of religiosity. Why are such so-called men of religion allured by material gain? Question mark. Because material gain can enable one to fulfill desires, which in turn satisfy sense gratification. The cycle of occupational engagements includes so-called religiosity, followed by material gain, and material gain followed by fulfillment of desires. However, the real need of the spirit soul is that he wants to get out of the limited sphere of material bondage and fulfill his desire for complete freedom. He wants to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe to see the free light of the Spirit. That complete freedom is achieved when he meets the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is a dormant affection for God within everyone. Spiritual existence is manifested through the gross body and mind in the form of perverted affection for gross and subtle matter. Therefore, we have to engage ourselves in occupational engagements that will evoke our divine consciousness. And it's acknowledged here that even in the Vedas, there are allurements. You worship this god, or you do this religious ceremony, and you'll get this position in the heavenly planets. You'll get this lifestyle, this standard of living. But it also says in the Bhagavad Gita that one should not be attracted by the flowery words of the Vedas, because the benefits they give are the same benefits that are available to the animals, and they're also temporary. By worshiping some of the demigods and doing certain rituals, according to some of the lesser Vedic principles and stipulations, you can rise to the position of a demigod. You can get a much higher standard of living. You can live for hundreds of thousands of years. But at the end, it's all temporary. On the other hand, if you use that same amount of time and energy to achieve love of God, listen to what's described here. Mam upecha punar janma, Krishna tells to Arjuna, Mam upecha punar janma, those who attain me, as opposed to, say, the realms of the demigods of the heavenly planets, all of them have to come back from Evam Twayi Swargaloka Vishati Sinye Punya Marka Loka Vishalam Evam Twayi Dharma Manu Prapanam Gatakatum's Kama Kabalabante. From the higher planets of the demigods, one eventually has to come down and take birth again in this material world. There's a nice example of this in the Mahabharata, where at one point during the Pandavas' exile, Bhima, who has a strength of 10,000 elephants, is swallowed by this snake. So you can imagine, if Bhima had that kind of strength, this must have been an exceptional, extraordinary snake. So anyway, while Bhima's sort of wrestling with this issue of being swallowed by the snake, Yudhishthira, who's always philosophically inclined, enters into this kind of a dialogue with the snake. And so he asks the snake, you're so powerful. How did you, you're like wrapping yourself and constricting yourself, and you've got your jaws on my brother Bhima, who's as powerful as 10,000 elephants. So what's your history? How did you get here in this form? So he says his name was Nahusha. These Vedic rituals. He worshipped, he did the rituals, he paid the Brahmins in order to get elevation to the higher planets, and it worked. It worked. He says, by performance of religious rituals, I became so powerful that I coursed through the heavens on a golden chariot. I became the emperor of the wide earth, and even the Gandharvas, Yakshas, and Rakshasas, and all the inhabitants of the three worlds, even the rishis, paid me taxes. Listen to this, such was my power as a result of using religiosity for material gain. He says he got to the point, he says, such was my power that I withdrew the energy of anyone simply by looking at them. So by now, the materialists in our audience are listening to this and saying, wow, I want that. That sounds like the ultimate. But that's not the end of the story. What happened to Nahusha after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets where the pious dwell? And I'll just give you the dynamics here. One is elevated to the higher planets, yes, by performance of religious activities, rituals, worshiping the demigods. However, it is the punya, it is the credit which you've accumulated down here, which is the fuel that sends you up high. However, as we know with any airplane, it can only stay aloof as long as there's fuel in the tanks. But when the fuel is exhausted, the airplane has to come down again. So the fuel in the tanks of the demigods are the pious religious works they did on earth, but every day they enjoy as a demigod, the sands are leaking out of the hourglass. And when all those sands have exhausted themselves, what happens is they again have to descend and retake birth in this material world. And you know that's about to happen when they've been up there for so long, they've enjoyed opulence and affluence for so long, that inevitably they get prideful. They get prideful. And when they get prideful, that's all she wrote. The trapdoor is about to open and they're going to fall back down to earth. So Nahusha described, he's riding a golden chariot, everyone paid taxes to him. He withdrew people's Shakti just by looking at them. And if you're thinking, wow, I want that, that's about as good as it gets, just listen to these couple sentences. He says, then my pride overwhelmed me, and I lost my good sense. My knowledge became covered by the ignorance born of pride. I ordered the Brahmin sages. He ordered the sages, the Brahmins, to draw my chariot, and thus offended them. One day, while various sages were drawing his chariot, he with the pace that they were going, and he reached out with his leg and he kicked one of the sages, whose name was Agastya Muni. And Agastya Muni turned around and cursed him, that all of his opulence, his sojourn in the heavenly planets was at an abrupt end, and Agastya cursed him to fall down to earth and take birth as a big fat snake. So why does this verse say that occupational engagements, even religious, should never be engaged in for material gain? Because even if you get to live on the planets for hundreds of thousands of years, like Nahusha, you inevitably get prideful, commit an offense, and have to come back down. So it's a Ferris wheel. The whole karma kanda, religiosity, rituals, piety, good karma, sometimes up, sometimes down. Prabhupada says, the purport is that instead of being elevated to the spiritual world, from which there is no longer any possibility of coming down, one simply revolves in the cycle of birth and death in the higher and lower planetary systems. Now, what's the option? If you take the incalculably valuable minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, and years of this human form of life, what other far superior result can you achieve? What other profit can you get? And that's described in the Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna to Arjuna. Mamupetya punarjanma. Those who attain me, my transcendental abode, transcending, getting escape, getting freedom from this material world, Dukkhalema sasvatam, which is full of miseries and temporary. From the highest planet to the lowest planet, from the planet of the demigods to the hell, they're all places of misery where repeated birth and death take place. So Krishna says, by dedicating your energy, your labor, your profits to honor me, the result is that you will be able to get freedom from the misery, the restrictions, the chains of birth, death, disease, and old age in this material world, and go to me. And how do we know that Krishna's abode is the supreme abode? What's another way to tell that gain in the transcendental lotus feet of Lord Krishna cannot be compared to anything that's available from the highest to the middle to the lowest planets in this material world? What's the ultimate proof? Napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gatim. Having achieved that team, that ultimate destination, samsiddhim, which represents the perfectional stage of the human form of life, the perfectional stage of all occupational duties, the perfectional stage of all religiosity, those Mahatmas never come back to this material world again. So who in their right mind would not make the ultimate investment, having achieved this human form of life, to achieve love of Godhead and go back to home, back to Godhead? Compared to that, becoming a billionaire, minister, is a tragedy, a tragic waste of time and energy, unless and until, of course, one leverages one's position to honor God. I'll just conclude here with the translation of that verse by Srila Prabhupada. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this material world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Prabhupada continues, spiritual existence is possible only by hearing and chanting the divine activities of the Supreme Lord, and any occupational activity which does not help one to achieve attachment for hearing and chanting the transcendental message of Godhead is simply a waste of time. Do you agree with me, based on the ground that we've covered this morning? This is because other occupational duties cannot give liberation to the soul. Even the of the salvationists are considered to be useless because of their failure to pick up the fountainhead of all liberties. The gross materialists can practically see that his material gain is limited to time and space, either in this world or in the other. Even if he goes up to the planets of the demigods, he will find no permanent abode for his hankering soul. The hankering soul must be satisfied by the perfect scientific process of perfect devotional service. One should not engage himself in any sort of occupational service for material gain only, nor should material gain be utilized for one's personal sense gratification. I actually had several more stories to share with you, but we've already passed 45 minutes here, blissfully extolling the virtues of the Lord. And I've got a low power warning from my phone here. So in spite of the possibility of continuing on with all this nectar, we're going to leave you hanging here and invite you to rejoin us tomorrow when we celebrate the glorious appearance of the half-man, half-lion incarnation of Lord Nrsingadev and the fidelity of his faithful 5-year-old devotee, Prahlad Maharaj. Thank you so much. We're looking at Marilyn, Thomas, Mala, and many others who have scrolled up. We certainly appreciate your taking the time out of all the options that are available to be with us. And be safe, be happy. We'll be back with you later on. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.